Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. Today is episode number 1, where I will talk a little bit about who I am and our first topic, predatory energy. Hello, and thank you for joining me on my very first podcast episode. My name is Nadia Harankiu, and today we are talking about predatory energy. Before we get into that, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and my background, as well as what brought me here to share this podcast with you all. So, I work professionally as a shaman or medicine woman, psychic healer, medical medium. There are many names for what I do. Basically, I'm a spiritual doctor and I help people solve problems and navigate the spiritual realm in ways that other people cannot. I started this job, if you can call it a job, about 8 years ago when I had a spontaneous initiation as a shaman. I needed to quit my job and change my entire life to accommodate this calling, and now it is my full-time gig. Doing this work is something I love deeply, and it is also incredibly challenging. It is not just a job, but a life path for sure. In my profession, I see people who have anything from energy stuckness to possession to debilitating depression and anxiety or illnesses that cannot be solved elsewhere. People often come to me when they have nowhere else to turn and they are willing to look at things that are weird and unknown and completely outside of the box. I do this work full time, and I also run a nonprofit organization called Sacred Heart Medicine Sanctuary, where I offer free and discounted services to the public as a shamanic healer, as well as classes and lessons and ceremony for those in need. Throughout these podcast episodes, I'm sure I will be revealing so much information about my background and where I came from. And right now it just seems silly to go too deeply into it. Most of my work that I do is directly spirit-led, which means I work with the spirit or the energy of people, places, and things, basically the other side of our current reality. And I use that information that is gained to help the person in front of me, the one who is seeking healing or whatever it is that they're seeking by coming to work with me. Now, over the last few years, it has become very clear that although I'm really good at my job, it is time to share the information that I have, to share the wisdom that has been imparted to me by the spirits, by the plants, by the earth, by my mentors. I have so much knowledge or wisdom that I've gained over the years doing this work and nobody to share it with. And so I've decided to create this podcast to share the things that I see, the things that I know, and the things that might be able to help you on your healing path, whether it's personal or professional. Now, in today's topic, we are going to go deep, and that is kind of the foundation of shamanic practice. We go to those deep places that other practitioners don't tend to want to go and shed light on shadows, demons, and other darkness or pieces of ourselves that we have kept repressed for one reason or another. And predatory energy is probably one of the nastiest energies that I discuss with people on a fairly regular basis. And I have a lot of knowledge around it that I would love to share with you. So I am personally very familiar with predatory energy due to childhood sexual assault instances. I was a victim to molestation and other activities multiple times during my childhood, and coming into adulthood, I still really carried that victim energy of those occurrences, and so it made me really sensitive to the predator energy. And I think this is the case in healing pretty much anything, is that if we're still holding on to a vibration, we will often attract either the same or the opposite vibration depending on our healing path. So in my case, I was still in this victim mode, or some part of me was still in this victim mode. And so I attracted other predators. And I was attracted to predators because I had this unhealed piece that required, it's almost like a digging at the trauma. Like, let me push this down a little bit further and force you to look at it, force you to be in so much pain and discomfort that you have to do the healing. And that's kind of a really interesting phenomenon of healing work. And the way that I often see it is like an opposite of energies. So if I am holding the victim energy, the opposite of that energy is the predator energy, and it needs to come in order to create balance and wholeness and healing. So you actually need both energies. Now, the other side of that is there is also a predator inside me that is unhealed. And it's another reason why I can identify and see the predator energy really clearly. And I'll talk a little bit more about the woman's version of predator later in the podcast. So, as you may have guessed, this is not a cut and dry topic. Nothing in the shamanic realm is. It's not like, oh, this is predator and this isn't. There is so many layers and so many dimensions to this energy, and people can hold it for different reasons. So, I'm going to start by talking about a client session a few years ago where I was working with a man. He held really strong predator energy, and it was in his field because he had a sexual assault experience as a child that still remained unprocessed. Now, the interesting thing is that he wasn't stuck so much in the victim energy at that moment. He was stuck in the predator energy. So some of us flip into predator as a way to understand their victimness. So carrying that predator energy doesn't mean that you are a predator necessarily, but you're holding on to and embodying that energy as a means for processing previous trauma. So that was very interesting. But it also really helped me to help him because we could talk about, okay, when was the moment in your life where you were a victim? We're going to go back and chat with that, 5-year-old version of yourself. What does he need? Do we need to do a soul retrieval? Do we need to do somatic work? Do we need to dialogue with him on a regular basis? Do we need to play with him? In my sessions, it's often pretty clear, like, okay, here's the trailhead. The trailhead to healing is the predator energy, and I have to know what questions to ask and how to get us down that trail to reach the point of healing. And sometimes it's a one session thing, and sometimes we work together over the course of weeks, months, or years. So, predator energy can come up in unprocessed victim as a means to process. So, that's one. The other way it can come up is if you were a predator at some point, intentionally or unintentionally, and you have a lot of unprocessed shame and guilt and other things around it, right? So people who have been preyed upon prey upon other people. It means a lot of unraveling. If you have hurt someone else, especially, in your younger years while you were still figuring life out, you have to heal that shame and guilt of what you did. And that's actually probably covering up the shame and guilt of when you were a victim yourself. So it would be a multi-step healing process to unravel the predator energy. Now, the two examples I've given are not the most common situations where I see predator energy. The most common one is this. It is a typically male who is not in touch with their feminine. So they carry this predator energy towards the divine maiden, right? So they often go after women who are in divine maiden kind of energy. So that means you're not quite a child, but you're also not divine feminine, fully embodied woman energy. You're in maiden. It's like very pure, very sweet, very playful, very loving. And because the majority of men were not taught how to get in touch with that feminine aspect of themselves, they are constantly trying to take it from someone else. So when we're thinking about that most common instance of feeling that predatory male energy, That's what it is. They are seeking that part of the feminine that they were not taught to access, that they don't know how. And so unconsciously, they're trying to take it from someone else. And this means that they have a lot of shadow work to do around their inner feminine, getting in touch with their emotions, getting in touch with being a little more fluid and less rigid, less control, less rules, less boxes, less intellectualizing of things. And so that would be the way that I would work with a man who has predatory energy for that reason. We would go and we would work with feminine energy. We would work with feminine plants and feminine practices and really teach him how to cultivate that. And then the predatory energy goes away because he now has access to that energy within himself. Now, I think for me, this was a really common occurrence. It's something that I've seen in men for as long as I've been doing this work. And it's always been really clear and really non judgmental when I do see it. Like, okay, cool. He needs to access this. Let me help him. We watch a man heal. It's absolutely amazing. The most surprising thing for me, and this wisdom did not reveal itself until just the last couple months, is the way that women carry predatory energy towards men. So this was super fascinating because I currently just wrapped up a divorce and a 14-year marriage. And in this marriage, I was deeply unhappy for many, many years, but found myself not being able to leave it. And I couldn't understand why. I couldn't see it. And as we began the divorce process and I was going through the motions of healing and grieving and understanding my attachments and the anger and all the things that come with separating yourself from another person, I was working in ceremony and I was working with this beautiful man and, a group of 12 other people. But this guy had a really nice light about him. He definitely carried like a really pure masculine energy, a lot of medicine. And one of the best parts about my work is that I am constantly exposed to opportunities to heal myself and opportunities to learn and have my stuff reflected back at me so that I can work on it and deal with it and process it. And, it's challenging, but also so cool. It's like going to school every single day. Anyway, I'm in ceremony. I'm working with this man, and he's bringing up all kinds of like thoughts and emotions inside me. And I get this really clear picture about predatory energy in women. Now, predatory energy shows up in women when they go after men who are not in their full masculine energy. So, men who are still in adolescent boy energy, like they haven't, it's like their energy hasn't quite initiated into manhood. And so they're not 100% mature. They're not rooted in their own purpose and path. They don't have good boundaries. They don't have good structure and foundation, that sort of thing, right? You can tell the difference between a man who's a man and a man who's not. And when women go after men who are not in their full masculine, they are the predator. So they're intentionally going after a man who cannot meet them where they're at, who cannot handle their muchness, who cannot give them the things that they need. And then they're automatically slipping into this like mother role where they will be criticizing him, they will be belittling him, it will never be good enough for her. So you're always one step above him. And that's really interesting because women do that to avoid stepping into their own power. Because if they stepped into their own power and coupled with a fully masculine man, they would be held responsible 100% of the time. They wouldn't be able to be the mother to the son, the child, right? They wouldn't need to have the leg up on him all the time, or they wouldn't be able to. They would constantly have themselves checked and met and challenged. And I think a lot of women don't want to do that. And instead, there's this collective like, screw men, we can do it without you. We can't. We need men. We need partnership. We need balance within ourselves, but also externally. So much healing happens in that relational space, and there's so much benefit and beauty to having partnership. And I think a lot of what's going on out there is women avoiding stepping into their power and using men as the excuse. So, predatory energy in women is when they enter a relationship with a man who is not mature enough to meet them. And then he pays the price, and she makes sure that he does. So she's preying on him, and it prevents her from stepping fully into the divine feminine, from stepping fully into her power. And so, isn't it interesting how the predatory energy presents so much differently between men and women in this space? And both involve shadow aspects, right? So they involve looking at aspects of ourselves that are really hard to look at, that are really challenging to work on, and illuminating them and embodying those shadows and stepping into ourselves fully. And then the predatory energy goes away. So the interesting part of this is that I was coming to the realization that in my marriage, I was with someone who literally did not have the capacity to be what I needed in partnership. And I hung on to that like my life depended on it, because it did. Because as soon as I let go of that relationship, of that person, I would have to step fully into myself, and I was terrified to do it. So that information was imparted on me in the middle of a ceremony. It was like the epiphany of all epiphanies. It was so cool. And now it's something that I can identify in my clients. If I see it happening, I know exactly where we need to go in our conversation, in our work together, to help resolve it so they too can move forward in whichever way that they want. There you have it, predatory energy, a fun and lighthearted topic. I could talk about this topic all day. It is extremely complex and multifaceted, and I stayed relatively superficial with it because to talk about these things is really hard without lots of time, metaphor, and facial expressions. So thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, and I hope to see you next time. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, please hit the subscribe button and visit my website at www.sacredheartshaman.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.